Robert F. Kennedy's youngest son is facing charges tonight. He fought off two nurses who tried to stop him from taking his newborn baby out of the maternity ward. Douglas Kennedy says he wanted to take the child, quote, for a walk when he was stopped by a few nurses who had other ideas. Watch this. Douglas Kennedy was visiting his wife in January in the maternity ward, apparently wanting to take his baby outside for some fresh air. He says nurses said okay, but when others disagreed, things got nasty. Nurses say they stopped him at the elevator and he went for the stairs.
One of them got there first, I believe it was Miss Lane, put her hand on the handle of the door, and he wanted to get in. He removed her hand and twisted her arm so severely that she's had medical treatment for the condition of her arm.
Kennedy's lawyer says he was protecting his baby and used a knee to stop the nurses who were grabbing for the child.
The only aggressors were the nurses.
The nurses told police the baby's head was shaking violently. Kennedy's lawyer denies it, saying the baby slept through the whole thing. The child, fortunately, was not injured. An ER doctor and friend of Kennedy's who saw the scuffle says the nurses were the only aggressors. Was he defending his rights as a parent or refusing to follow a nurse's order? This happened on January 7th, but Mr. Kennedy was just charged last Thursday with harassment and endangering the welfare of a child. Both are misdemeanors. Here with me to discuss this, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh and attorney Lisa Bloom, author of the book Think. Now, before we get into our conversation, I want to read you a statement from Douglas Kennedy and his wife. It reads, "It's sickening to think that our simple desire to take our son outside for fresh air has been warped into a charge of child endangerment. The nurse had no right to attempt to grab our child out of his father's arms." And today, Northern Westchester Hospital released its own statement saying, quote, "We completely support the actions of our nursing staff in this case as they were clearly act out of concern for the safety of a newborn baby." Lisa, where do you come in on this?
Well, I just don't get this case. There's something weird going on here.
Yes,
when I had
is.
my children, okay,
Yes.
and we were in the hospital together,
Yes.
I wasn't under the impression that I could just take my baby and walk out the door.
No,
I mean,
nobody
you have
does
to
that.
be discharged.
Yes,
right?
nobody. You
And
can't,
so,
listen, if you're a patient, you can't walk
in fact,
out the door.
I can remember when my little baby girl was behind a thick glass window crying, and I was saying, give her to me, give her to me. She's crying, this is my baby. And they said, no, you can't have her for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I lost my mind. But I didn't kick, I didn't scratch, I didn't punch, I didn't yell.
You didn't run for the doors.
So,
you didn't grab the baby like a football and run for the finish
there's
line.
a little bit of elitism going on here. I don't care if you're a Kennedy, I don't care if you're a millionaire, you're a celebrity. You have to follow the hospital rules. That's the bottom line.
Mark, I agree with Lisa. Hospitals cannot function unless the structures are maintained that are there and designed to protect the patients, including newborn babies.
Yes, however, in this circumstance, there were some different facts that you haven't mentioned. With Kennedy at the time was a family friend who was apparently an emergency room doctor who not only encouraged him but assisted him in getting outside. Now, I understand what the staff did and why they did it. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. This case isn't about taking the baby out. It's about Kennedy's alleged harassment/battery on staff by twisting somebody's arm and kicking somebody. That clearly was not the right action under the circumstances.
Listen, in a hospital, I've been a physician since the early 80s. I've worked for decades in hospitals. In a hospital, when someone becomes aggressive in any way to anyone, they have a security force in every hospital that are there specifically for that purpose, to keep this kind of thing from happening. I am stunned that not only the poor nurses had to deal with this, but the local police department wasn't involved in helping them, that certainly their security forces didn't get involved as well. That's what they're there for, is to prevent, Mark, this kind of thing from happening. I'm not saying the hospital is wrong. I'm saying they should use more force.
Wow.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, true.
Absolutely.
Woo, tough guy.
Of course, they handcuff the guy?
No, they have things in a hospital called a show of force, where they will bring a group of people out, including officers, to surround the people that are misbehaving, to get them to behave in a way that is in the best interest and safety of the patients.
But I'm not going to go that far, because this is a father with his newborn baby, and he wants to take
He could have harmed that baby.
Well, he could have harmed the baby.
Even just running around with a baby, you know the shaken baby syndrome?
Well,
that's how that happens.
I mean, he could have done a lot of things, but there aren't any facts to support him.
Mark, that's how that happens.
Hold on. While I think that they might have been able to justify the 2 harassment charges for him touching the nurses the way that he did, that other charge, endangering the child, there was a witness who said that the child slept through the whole thing, And that child was never
Mark,
in
have you
any
tried to
danger.
wake up a newborn baby, for God's sakes? This is how shaken baby syndrome happens. People doing things of an aggressive nature around children.
Okay, but he's just holding the baby and trying to walk out the door.
He's
I think
not.
it's a stretch to get the shaken baby.
He knocked
Well, it
somebody
depends
to
on
the
the
ground.
facts,
He
Drew.
twisted
Okay,
somebody's
well, yeah,
arm.
but
Well-
the baby seems to be okay.
What's that, Mark?
Right.
So thank
it
God.
depends on the facts. Listen, you're not an eyewitness. The one witness that I read about said that the baby was not being shaken. Apparently, there's another viewpoint. It hinges upon what the facts are. There's clearly not proof beyond a reasonable doubt that that baby
Yeah,
was
but
in
if
any
that's the
danger. Thank
doctor
God.
who's a friend of the Kennedys, I mean, what do you expect he's going to say?
That's
He's
what I'm
going to
afraid
support
of.
his
That's
wealthy
exactly
friend.
right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm
CNN
going with the nurses and the hospital
Me
personnel.
too. CNN talked to the nurse's attorney earlier today, and he described the alleged aggression that the nurses endured from Mr. Kennedy. Take a look at this.
One of them got there first, I believe it was Miss Lane, put her hand on the handle of the door, and he wanted to get in. He removed her hand and twisted her arm so severely that she's had medical treatment for the condition of her arm. The next event that took place immediately after the twisting of the arm was that Kerry Luciana was right in front of Mr. Kennedy, and he was holding the baby at that time, and she reached out because she saw the baby's head bobbing back and forth just to hold it in place. And as she did that, he kicked her with one of his legs, and she went flying through the air and landed basically in the middle of the corridor.
Mark, if I had been in that hospital and I saw a group of hospital staff, trained professionals, chasing a man with a baby because they were concerned, I would have joined in the chase.
And I would have too. And I'm not justifying his behavior at all. If it happened the way that that lawyer just alleged, then absolutely the charges are appropriate. I think, however, the judge or the prosecutor should consider the mitigating factors in determining the sentence. This wasn't a guy who just went in there to steal a baby and fight with people. Obviously, something was a little off. He was given wrong information by a family friend who thought they could take it out.
Stop there. Stop there. Something was a little off. Something was way off. Not a
For
little
sure.
off, way off. Lisa, you want to comment about that?
Maybe he's tired. He's got a new baby. I'd cut him some slack here. But the bottom line is the prosecutors had a couple of months to review all of this, all of the statements. And I can guarantee you they took into account this is a Kennedy, this is a wealthy family. We don't want to go after somebody like this unless there's a significant amount of evidence. They had a videotape, they had a number of witnesses, and they ended up charging him.
Well, in
That's
fact,
pretty big.
It is kind of big. And in fact, the attorney claims his client actually checked with another nurse who agreed to let him take the baby outside. Then things turned nasty when he was told otherwise. So he does get a little confusing. So watch this tape.
When another nurse gets involved in the mix and says, you cannot leave with your own child, she didn't have a right at that point to prevent that. And she certainly never had the right to lunge to grab this child from Douglas, from the father's arms. You've had nurses who clearly have stated false statements about what happened, have lied about what actually happened out of even in the camera view. Why they're doing it, I will let the public, I will let the DA to consider whether or not they have a motive other than the truth.
Mark, is he kidding? No right to do whatever they need to do to protect their patient, a newborn child? He's not the patient. The baby is.
I don't disagree with you, but again, it hinges upon the facts as to whether he should be charged. Did they lunge towards him, and as a result of that, he grabs the wrist to keep them away because he erroneously thinks he can walk out with the child? Or did he, in order to get out of the hospital because he's determined to do so, lunge towards them, kick another one? Again, it hinges upon the facts, Drew.
All right, wait, hang on.
I do,
but we can talk about the sympathy in a second, Lisa.